Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Adrian Talley, Superintendent of Indian Prairie. Tonight is another one of our parent universities, and tonight's topic is coaching your child through big emotions. We have had several parent universities this year. They are all found on our Indian Prairie website. And tonight is on a topic that parents have told us they wanted to talk about, and that's why we're going to do that tonight. I just want to let everyone know that on March 4th, we will have a mental health symposium. We are very much looking forward to this opportunity to talk with people, share with them resources that will address mental health issues. On the day, it'll be held at Mancilla Valley High School from 8 a.m. to 12:30 on Saturday, March 4th. We will have several breakout sessions. We will have gifts, and we will have prizes. We will have opportunities for you to hear from practitioners and to talk to people about how you can support not only your mental health, but the mental health of your children. So we hope that you will be able to attend. I now have the privilege of being able to introduce Ms. Dawn Forkner, our Social Emotional Learning and Wellness Coordinator. She will facilitate the meeting and lead us through this great discussion tonight. Ms. Forkner?
Thank you, Dr. Talley. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for an important discussion on how we as parents can coach our child through big, powerful emotions. As we continue to return to a sense of normalcy after the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent quarantine, parents and school staff have shared concerns about students experiencing a wide array of uncomfortable emotions, including sadness, anxiety, anger, and disappointment. This evening, we will share not only why students are having these big, powerful emotions, but also strategies parents can use at home to help their child recognize and regulate these feelings. If during the presentation you have any questions or want to share an idea, please send it in the chat, and if time allows at the end, we will circle back to those. Our presenter from the evening is Ms. Tracy Schwartz. She is the Social Emotional Learning Coach at Longwood Elementary School. Tracy has 30 plus years of experience working with young people in different settings, and she is also a district instructor for youth mental health first aid. So she is a wonderful resource for our district. In addition, at the end of his presentation, we'll have a panel discussion based on the questions that were submitted at registration. To include perspectives from all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, our panel includes not only Tracy, but Casey Woodham. She is the social worker at Neuqua Valley High School. Shelli, Kelsey, who is an SEL and academic coach at Fischer Middle School, and Elizabeth Mancilla, who is an SEL and academic coach at Granger Middle School. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tracy.
Hey, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Dr. Talley. It is truly my honor and privilege to be with all of you tonight for this Parent University event. I was overwhelmed a little bit by the amount of response, parents who were attending tonight, but I do think it speaks volumes to the types of challenges we all face as parents, coaching our kids through big emotions, and trying to do that in more healthy ways. So if no one has ever told you this before, welcome to the toughest job you will ever post on your resume, that being a parent. It is certainly not for the faint of heart. So I wanted to start by inviting you and welcoming you again, coaching your child through big emotions, and a quick fun little meme here on the right. Never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. So we're going to try and come up with some better strategies to share with you tonight. All right, so thank you, Dawn, for the introduction. Yes, I am an SEL coach at Longwood Elementary. I am a school counselor by training, and I've worked for a number of years with kids in different settings, from social services to high school counseling to now in the elementary setting. I'm also a trauma-informed practitioner, and I'm a parent, and I'm a parent of three, and 3 children that have gone through our district. I will also note that 2 of my children are neurodivergent, which means they have ADHD. And if you live that life, you know there are exceptional challenges to the emotional regulation that those kiddos experience. So I've been in the trenches with you. Thank you. All right, I just want to briefly go over my learning objectives for you tonight. When you leave tonight, I want you to be able to have a different lens to behavior and some basic brain science behind that behavior. I want you to have just at least one or two more skills in building the emotional competency of your kids, and really some strategic, practical strategies to how do I respond to big emotions in the moment and how not to respond. Sometimes that's just as important. And lastly, how to really make sure you're taking care of yourselves. So thank you. Those are those learning objectives for today. All right. So how do we view behavior? I love this image here on the left. All behavior is a form of communication, often driven by emotion. So I want you to think about that. When our children are compliant, or when they're focused, when they're following directions and obeying, however you choose to describe that behavior, life is pretty good. It's good for us, it's good for them. But when it's not, and their behaviors are not as we expect, or something we don't prefer, then what? So it's really important to think about what lens do we view those behaviors from then. So one of my favorite gurus in the field of child development and psych is Dr. Ross Greene. And this image here is toting one of his famous quotes: "Children do well if they can." I would argue that this is true of all people, not just kids. However, when kids can't do well, we as adults need to figure out what is getting in the way so we can help. Great. That can often feel like one more thing added to our parenting plate. But Dr. Greene's philosophy, widely supported by many clinicians in the field, believe that when a child is not doing well, tantruming, being defiant, resistant, demanding, it's really due to a lagging skill, something they don't know how to do yet, or because of some unmet need. For example, are they well rested? Do they need to sleep? Are they hungry? Have they had food? Are they feeling safe? Do they feel connected? Are they feeling loved? The second image here is one I also enjoy quite a bit from Dr. Greene. It's two adults viewing the same child, but through very different lenses. What one may view as manipulative, another sees as lacking skills. And I will address those differing views as we go through our presentation tonight, but I just wanted to begin by planting this seed. All right, so I said we'd begin with a little bit of basic brain science to help us understand what is happening in the brain when one of our kids is struggling with a big emotion. So imagine it's Monday morning. You're racing to get everyone out of the house to get to school. You've got an appointment. You need to get to work. You do a quick mental check. Do I have everything I need? Backpacks, lunches, your purse, your wallet. You shoo your kids in the car. You help buckle little ones in the seats. And as you're pulling out of the driveway, you think, yeah, we've done okay. We're going to make it today. And suddenly your fifth grader starts freaking out because he's sure he's going to fail his math test today, and there's no way he's going to school. Right? Been there? It's often these high pressure and time sensitive moments like these that we instinctively begin to react to that chaos going on around us. So your instinct may be, and I've done this, is to start freaking out too. We've got places to be and things we need to do. Or you may begin the lecturing of how, I had your son studied for math last night, and instead of staying up late and practicing on video games, he might actually be prepared for that test today. Or you may be the one to jump in, or in the moment talk about all the reasons why he shouldn't be worried. He's being ridiculous. You've got this. You're just fine. You're overreacting. But often neither of those approaches is going to help. So if you've been in that chaotic situation, similar to something like this before, and have felt really stuck, you're not alone. So for a couple of minutes, I just wanted to talk about this basic brain science and kind of just tune us into what's happening behind that meltdown or emotional outburst or that argument when it's happening. So I like to use the analogy of the upstairs and downstairs brain by Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA College of Medicine, someone highly regarded in the field. He's done a lot of research and study around what happens in our brains when we become triggered by an unsettling feeling or event. So we have an image here of the upstairs brain, thinking about the upstairs of our home. That upstairs brain is where things are good. We're feeling calm. We're able to think and problem solve. Our skills for engaging and playing and communicated are activated. We're in a good place. And then we have that downstairs brain. And we teach kids even at the elementary level. Down there lives the amygdala. And it's kind of like that barking guard dog. And this is the part of our brain that is responsive and defensive and often reactive. So when they're experiencing those big emotions, and it's really meant to be there for self-preservation. But it's when we're not really in danger and we're just over responding to something that's happened, we still, that becomes a problem. So this is where we begin to melt down, shut down due to the stressors, traumas, whatever triggers are going on for us. So in using that model, the chaotic situation, like I described earlier, your kid's upstairs brain has completely shut down when they are in that meltdown, fight, freeze, flight mode. And that downstairs brain is activated. So thinking about even our younger kids, when the downstairs brain gets triggered or activated, it's usually when they're feeling fear or anxiety or not sure. The upstairs brain goes offline. It's no longer working. And that is to ensure that the downstairs brain can focus on survival. That's why it was created. That's the reason it's there. So in the situation that I described earlier, it's your fifth grader wanting to stay home in order to avoid taking that math test. The mind will do whatever it takes to get rid of that feeling of fear and anxiety to calm that amygdala back down. So if that amygdala can calm down, then that upstairs brain can get back online. So most of our young kids, they don't yet have that neurological capability to calm their downstairs brain. They really do rely heavily on us as adults to help them learn those calming strategies. And that's often true for our school-age children and into our adolescence. So our first task as parents in any chaotic moment is to figure out how we can calm that downstairs brain in order to engage that upstairs brain. So we're going to talk about that. But as your kid is losing it in the car, all that logical, reasonable, you've got this, you're fine, you're overreacting, you're going to be okay, stop. It's not even being heard, and it's not being understood by that upstairs brain. But there is good news, and that is through connection and co-regulation, what we're going to be talking about tonight, we can begin to calm that downstairs brain. And there's also some other benefits to that. We'll share with you some strategies you can use to connect with your child and help him or her to get back onto that upstairs brain. And as our kids learn these strategies, new neural connections are made in the brain. And the more they do it, the more they practice it, the more connection is reinforced and the more learning takes place. So the goal is eventually to be able to allow them to regulate on their own. Now, having said all of this, in those moments, I'm also realistic. Are we going to remain calm and employ these wonderful strategies every time our kid flips their lid? Absolutely not. We're going to flip our own lid once in a while, and that's expected. We're human too. But if we can always try to remember that connection is regulating and making that part of our parenting mindset, when the opportunity arises to connect in that chaos, we are going to not only be shaping their brains, but we're also promoting peace in our relationship with them. And I don't know about you, but who wouldn't love more of that? All right, so we'll reference that upstairs, downstairs brain a couple of times as we go through. All right, so we talked a little bit about how do we help develop our own our kids' emotional awareness and build that competency in them. Really, one of the basic and easiest things is to talk about emotions. From little on, preschool age, share your emotions, your feelings and experiences with kids. The more we begin to build feelings, vocabulary, and language, and make it normal and healthy to talk about how we're feeling, we will begin to build competency in our kids. So even with preschool and elementary kids, one of the best ways to do this is to read to them. Use stories and books, asking about, I wonder how the characters are feeling. What are some things that they might be experiencing? For example, I wonder how the bear felt when there was no honey left in his pot. Or I wonder what the main character was feeling when her friends started sharing secrets that she had invested and confided into her. And especially our kids who are reluctant to always share what's going on with them, using the characters of a book or a movie or a video, it gives us someone else to be talking about, but allows them to also process through and build those skills. All right, we can do that, like I said, with all the things that are important to them. Who are the social media celebrities? Who are their influencers? And then model being curious. We can build on that then by really asking them how their day was specifically and what kind of emotions they felt. I fall same trap often of, how was school today? It was fine. What'd you do? I don't know. Okay, and we move on, right? But if we can start to ask, hey, how did you feel after you took that math test today? Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be? Maybe it wasn't. What did you learn from it, right? Or we can begin to ask them how they felt when their teacher did X, Y, and Z, or someone asked them about something else. All of this then happens through connection with our kids and dialing into their interests, their challenges. The other thing that becomes really important in helping our kids build their own emotional awareness and skills is really looking at, do we model our emotions in healthy ways? How do we express the things that we're feeling? So I encourage you to really be mindful of this. Oftentimes we as adults actually end up asking our kids to do things that we're not necessarily doing either, or that we aren't all that good at. The classic example is watching an adult scream at a child to stop screaming. The irony of that, but it happens. I have been guilty of that myself. So in addition to modeling those healthy emotions, I really encourage parents, to let their kids be their own problem solvers. I know it's natural to want to fix our kids' problems. We want to swoop in, but when we begin to do that and begin to solve every little glitch for them, we're really denying our kids the opportunity and chance to learn healthy coping skills. So I encourage you to let your children try to solve those low stakes problems on their own. And through doing that, they'll gain confidence that, maybe I actually can deal with these stressors and setbacks on my own, because they're only going to get harder the older they get. I think another thing that becomes really important in this area of building that emotional competency is combating negative thinking. And I think it's also important to be aware of our own negative thinking. So examples of, kids saying, I'm terrible at math, or I hate my hair, or I'm never even going to make the team. So why do I even bother trying out? Children, teens, we adults can easily fall into that trap of negative thinking. But I encourage you that when your children start to use negative self-talk, don't just disagree with them. And what I mean by that is, no, you're not. Your hair is gorgeous. You're so pretty. Oh, you're great at math. What are you talking about? Really, what I encourage you to do is to think or ask them to really think about what it is they're saying. Is what they're saying really true? Or reminding them of times when they worked through a tough situation, or when they did practice and make something, accomplish a goal that they had set out to make. Using past experiences and learning to frame these things positively goes a long way too in helping our kids develop resiliency to the stressors they're going to incur. All right, another famous quote. I love visuals. When little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not to join their chaos. Again, not always easy. I totally get that. So this is the third learning objective that I really hope you will take away from tonight, if nothing else, if this is the thing that sticks with you, as we're talking about how are we coaching kids through big emotions. We're going to talk a little bit about in the moment, and then I want to finish up with how can we create an environment where we have less of those emotional outbursts and meltdowns. All right, so armed with some basic knowledge and understanding that the brain develops from the bottom up. When we go to support a dysregulated kiddo, our support should also begin from the bottom and slowly rise to the top. So I like to utilize this 3 R's model that was introduced by Dr. Bruce Perry. Dr. Perry is, again, a highly regarded American researcher and clinician in psychiatry. His model of the 3 R's, this inverted triangle, to again help us focus on when our kids are in distress, they're in that downstairs brain or in that amygdala, that lower center of the brain. We need to start there. And that happens through regulation, relation, and then reasoning. So this process of moving from the bottom to the top in order to support them is to help them get back down to calm. And of course, ultimately, our goal is for our kids to be able to do this on their own and self-regulate. However, this is a developmental process and it spans all of childhood and adolescence and even into young adulthood. So I'm always encouraging parents to be mindful of what's a reasonable expectation of my child at different ages. And also remember, the brain is not fully developed until the age of 26. So all of those capabilities are still growing. And for some kids, this is going to take even a little bit longer. All right, so this method of the 3 R's, it can often be challenging for us as adults because we have our own triggers, right? Where our own triggers usually revolve around our own life experiences. Then that feeds into our beliefs and our values, which makes up our worldview. We have an idea of how we expect and want our kids to behave or to respond or to handle things. So often when we are also triggered by our child's big emotions, we typically try to regain control of the situation or the child by going right to the top, right? We often want to go right into reasoning brain. So this can look like questioning. Well, why are you upset? Why are you throwing a fit? Why didn't you study for your test last night? Or demanding reflection. Well, you should have thought about this. Didn't you think about what would happen if you didn't settle and you didn't trust and you weren't ready to prepare and take the test today? Or we can start commanding, yelling, punishing. If you don't, then I'm going to do this. And I've heard all kinds of things. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later on. But as we continue to try and reason with our child in this moment, they're only responding back in a way that challenges often how we feel. They become more dysregulated, we become more dysregulated, and that battle of wills ensues. So although it feels like this approach will help in the moment, like I just need this to stop because it's uncomfortable or we need to move on to something else. When we begin from the top, at least from a brain state point of view, really all we do is serve to fuel more fear and put our kids further into that downstairs brain. So typically what ends up happening is the child becomes even more emotional and it all intensifies rather than getting to calm. All right, so in the next few slides, I want to break down each of those levels for us. But first I want to, Dawn, if you will click over to one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Bruce Perry. A dysregulated adult will never regulate a dysregulated child. It's never happened. I don't know, in my 20 years of parenting, when I've lost my cool and I have flipped my lid, I have not been able to get the results of a calm and regulated child because I'm not in my thinking brain either. So if we are here to help children manage these big emotions, we really want to think about how are we steadying ourselves as best we can to take on the challenge. Our kids are continually looking to us to be the anchor in their storm, and we really need to be prepared to know how to respond. And like I said, how not to respond. Where do we begin? We really need to put our own oxygen mask on first, right? We use this analogy for a lot of things, but if we are going to avoid joining their chaos, we need to make sure that we are ready and steadying the ship so that we don't go down with them. All right, so we'll move into regulation. All right, so now it's happening. We're here, the meltdown's happening, the outburst, the screaming match, the crying, whatever it is. The very first thing is to stop and breathe. Take a deep breath, accept that it's happening, because it will happen. It is a part of childhood, and it is natural, and it is developmentally appropriate. The moment we begin to go, all right, okay, so this is where we're at, this is going on, how am I going to respond? We are in a much better place to move forward than to try and put the brakes on, go to that reasoning point and stop. So accept what's happening. If you're with a little kiddo, get down on their level. If they're on the floor, get on the floor with them. And really focus on minimizing your words. Again, keeping in mind, we're down here in the downstairs brain right now. They're not able to take in what we're doing. And when we get verbally vomiting, it often is just irritating and even more dysregulating to our kiddos. One of the other things I really try to encourage parents and caregivers is to avoid taking the meltdown personally. And I know that that is hard, especially if they're using words that are verbally attacking us that seem really personal. Most kids, when it's over, the shame, the guilt, the remorse is there. So again, avoid taking it personally in the moment. Being able to do that keeps us better regulated and able to help out our kiddo. Focus right here is making them feel safe and loved. Touch can be very helpful. Show them that you're physically there to support them. A pat on the back, a hug, rubbing their shoulder, letting them know, I see you, I hear you, and I'm here for you. And at a minimum, labeling the emotion. For example, I can see that you're upset, and I really want to go, like the kiddo, I get that you want to stay home today and avoid this test. I know it's hard. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to help calm you down. That's it. I'm acknowledging, and we're going to move on. I put in the ignore others looks because if this happens in public, which has happened to me, we often tend to panic because we fear being judged and we don't want others being annoyed or the looks. It's uncomfortable. But again, if we can stick with avoiding taking this personally and knowing every child of every parent has done this before, we can stay more calm and we can stay more regulated in the moment. All right, so as our kiddo is starting to calm down a little bit, it's really important, according to the model by Dr. Perry and one that I use with my students and I encourage parents to use, it's really important to relate and connect with our child through a genuine relationship in that moment. And really what our kids need in that place is some validation. Validating feelings is so important. And I know for me as an adult that's important when I'm experiencing something that's difficult, or I'm struggling with a big feeling, or I'm just really frustrated. The last thing I want someone doing is ignoring it, minimizing it, not hearing it, just being validated with, wow, I can see how that would be hard for you, is very regulating. And it begins that level of relation that our kids really need. So we can, again, use fewer words. We don't want to start verbally vomiting just yet. But we also need to be very aware of the tone that we're using. Our kids are super intuitive and sensitive to that. And when we are not in a calm and genuine tone, it's better than that we say nothing at all. because they will pick up on that, and we can re-trigger to go right back into that downstairs brain and bring the big emotion and reaction back up instead of moving toward being able to calm and reason. So again, keeping this focus right here on connecting with our kids. So reasoning can happen once our child is actually calm. There's a lot that goes on in reasoning, and I like to also add repair at this level. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But this is where we can really begin to talk about other ways that perhaps your child could have handled that really big emotion. We are going to be talking a little bit about calming strategies. What did they use? Did they forget to use one? Why weren't they helpful? We can start talking and brainstorming problem solving at this point. If it is an issue, a problem that's caused the big reaction, we can ask them, you know, what tools did they have? What have they already tried to solve this problem? How might you help? What else could help? When we're talking adolescents and teens, you know, they're at that age level where they want more control. They're trying to exert more independence. They don't always want us rushing in. So we can frame those questions to be more like, do you want my help? Or do you just need me to listen? Sometimes they're just venting and they just want you to listen. Asking them, how can I support you, instead of assuming that they need you to support them. It can be really irritating to a teenager or a young adult in this age group. And then asking them, what's your plan? What are you thinking about doing? How do you think you're going to solve this? Again, it goes back to allowing them to solve their own problems and then providing support only as it's needed. That helps build that resiliency and that independence in our kids. All right, one really important piece here that I want to make sure we talk about for just another minute is, if you have instilled a limit, or maybe you denied a privilege, or you didn't give your child something that they wanted, whether that was a toy with a young child or whether that was hanging out with a friend and your teenager, with your teenagers, this is not the time to give in. Stick to that original decision. And I know sometimes out of fear, and I've done this myself, I give in because I'm worried about recycling back into that big meltdown and that big emotion all over again. However, when we stay calm and when we are prepared, we can lament, you know, with our kids. Yeah, I know it stinks that you can't have that new toy right now. Or I know it feels really unfair that you can't go hang out with your friends right now and they can, but I've made my decision and you're going to stick with that decision. This is why it's also so important for us to practice staying calm, because when we get caught up in the chaos, like in the scenario I described earlier of the 5th grader and his math test, when we go into the threatening or the punishing that I had referred to on that other slide. For example, if you don't stop freaking out, I'm going to take away your Xbox for the next 6 months. If you don't calm down and get out of this car right now, you can forget all about your birthday. We're done. Really? Are we really going to stick to that kind of consequence? If you are, okay. But most of us, in all reality, after we have calmed back down, are going to realize that our consequence that we threatened is not logical. And we're most likely not going to enforce it. So we have now lost an opportunity to help our child build emotional competency and resiliency. By having to suffer a consequence that is logical and that is meaningful. So when we're able to stay better calm, like I said, we provide a more predictable, logical consequence, and that's hopefully only going to serve us and our children for the better. So don't give in. I know it's not always easy, but I really encourage you to do that. And then lastly, reassure that you really just love and care about your child. It's really important, I think, also at this point to separate the behavior from the child themselves. Avoid name calling or terms like, you know, you're always and you never, and those types of things that become very generalized and shaming and blaming. What is okay, I think, is to tell your child, hey, the way that you just behaved or the way that you acted was really frustrating for me too, or it was really upsetting. Um, I think it's important for our kids of all ages to be able to realize that their behaviors do impact those around them, both positively and negatively. Um, but again, the key is trying to do that without the blame and the shame. Co-regulation as a strategy or a method to reducing the number of emotional outbursts and challenges for our children, I think is just as important as when we talk about co-regulation in the moment of the chaos and the meltdown. When we are able to co-regulate, and that's a process, I like the definition here, the supportive process between caring adults, children, youth, and young adults that fosters or encourages self-regulation development is what co-regulation is. So we're going to talk about what exactly that looks like just a little bit in a practical sense. So through this process, we really help our kids build resiliency and self-regulation through our relationship with our kids by creating a safe relational environment that is dependable, predictable, and manageable. And again, that goes back to are we taking care of our own needs? Are we able to stay regulated and calm? Are we able to model healthy handling of emotions and big feelings? Knowing that our kids are always looking up to us to help them gain control of their own emotions and feeling states, this becomes really important. So how do we do this? Providing warm, responsive relationships, showing affection, giving care, like if your kid's not a hugger, then give them a high five or give them a fist bump or, leave them notes. Our teenagers are like, oh, gross. I don't want to, send them a text in the morning. Let them know, you're amazing. I love you, like you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Find different ways of connecting with your kid that meets their language. And then really cluing into our kids. What are their cues? What are the triggers that set them off? Because when we can predict more of those things, we can move into preventing some of these bigger meltdowns and outbursts, especially during times of stress. So the stronger we can build relationships with our kids through words and actions, even if they act like they don't want it, it's okay, it's good for them. Really taking an interest in their lives, getting into their worlds, understanding what's important to them, and not minimizing that. Listening. A lot of kids will tell me, my parents, my grown-ups just don't listen. And I know my own kids have said that to me before. So I'm always reminded, like, I need to be available. And then secondly, we talk about structuring the environment. Really what we're talking about is thinking through and establishing what are the values and the expectations and the rules in our household. Are they predictable? Can my kids tell me this is allowed, this is not? If I do this, this is what's going to happen. This is a trigger for my mom. This is a trigger for my dad, my grandpa, my auntie, my uncle, whoever it is they're living with. The more consistent, predictable our routines and expectations can be for our kids, the less we will see some of those emotional outbursts is always our goal. And then lastly, teaching and coaching those self-regulation skills. We've talked a little bit already about how we can do some of that. One of the things I wanted to talk about, though, or just mention, is that when you do see your child handling a situation well, point it out. Compliment them on it. Say, hey, I noticed the other day, I noticed you took a deep breath when you were starting to get frustrated when your brother was XYZ. Or, I think it was really helpful the other day when you walked away from your sister instead of, maybe the other things they would have done when he or she wouldn't share with you. Or even with teenagers, I'll use this with my own kids. I saw you bite your tongue when I know you really wanted just to kind of unleash on your brother. So pointing out when they're doing well, it shows them that you're paying attention, and it helps them to even evaluate and, excuse me, be aware of what they're doing well. So these are just two visuals on connection and creating safety. When a child can't calm down, they need connection and comfort, not criticism and control. And the other one is just simply a visual of what co-regulation can look like. If you want to click again, Jeannie. Thank you. I love the visual there of our kid hot and sweaty and all on fire, right? What I notice about the parent is she's not speaking. We're not pushing the kiddo away. We're welcoming them in. We are regulating. We are offering our calm, and in the process of that, helping them to calm down. All right, then we'll go into our last slide. These are just how do I manage my own stress? Like I said, parenting is tough stuff. And I think it's harder today than perhaps it ever was. I feel like the world just comes at us at a warp speed, and our kids are so exposed to so many things that I know I certainly wasn't. But really think about, I think most importantly, setting boundaries for yourself and learning to say no. Practicing gratitude is an excellent way to really help ground ourselves in turning around the focus from all the things going wrong to noticing some of the things going right. And then lastly, really unplugging, unplugging digitally, technologically, and all the other ways that we stay distracted from ourselves and from our kids. All right, we have just a few parent resources here. I mean, I could have filled slides and slides of resources, but these will be available to you after the presentation, and you can connect back. There are many of them out there, and I just encourage you to look at the different ways and different types of resources that are out there. If you're struggling in particular with your child and you're still kind of at a loss and not knowing where to go, I often encourage parents to reach out to their child's counselor at school, their teachers, someone they're connected with, speaking to your pediatrician, your healthcare provider about some of the things you're dealing with, and letting those people be resources for you. And lastly, I just wanted to mention Dr. Talley and a team of people were able to secure an amazing grant for our district this year through Edward Elmhurst Mental Health. And we have created Indian Prairie Cares, in which we have vetted therapists coming into our schools one night a week and on Saturday in a few select schools. And there's a link there that if you feel you are at a point where you need to secure or look into some professional help for you, your family, your child, this is one avenue through our district. And if you click the link there under Indian Prairie Cares, you will find other mental health resources for you as well. So I know we're going to jump into our panel, but before we do that, I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us tonight, for investing in your children and their mental health. And hopefully you have 2 or 3 new takeaways to go and employ. And certainly we'll gather more in our Q&A panel tonight. Thank you.
All right, as I mentioned at the beginning, we had a wide variety of questions that were brought to us through the registration form. And I wanted to approach them from all levels because I know we have parents of some of our youngest students to some of our oldest. So besides Tracy, who, as I said before, is the SEL coach at Longwood, so she works primarily K-5. We also have Casey Woodham, who is a social worker at Neuqua Valley High School. We have Elizabeth Mancilla and Shelli Kelsey, both are SEL and academic coaches. Elizabeth is at Granger and Shelli is at Fischer, and they have a wide variety of experience working with kids that are struggling with dysregulation. All right, so in our panel, I will go ahead and share the question, and then I will give each of them a chance to respond based on their level. We're going to kind of do it from like oldest kids down to youngest kids, but we know that there's things that we can take from all of these levels. So the first question that came up, and it was something that I saw in a lot of different ways, but how do you encourage a child to talk about their emotions or to name them when they can't describe to you exactly what they're feeling. So you're seeing those external behaviors, you know that they're experiencing some uncomfortable feelings, but they're having difficulty expressing to you what that feeling is. Casey, how would you handle that?
I would encourage, so at the high school level or the teenagers, the older teenagers, I would, talk with them about, or sometimes getting into an activity. I know Tracy had mentioned earlier about like with the stories, and kind of like making it like a third person, where they're not necessarily talking about themselves. Another thing that works very well at the high school level, when I'm working with students, is like coloring, getting out the colored pencils, getting out the coloring books. And, if they're distracted while they're talking, that really, really helps. I mean, sometimes they just don't even realize how much they are opening up. Or if they're drawing kind of what they're feeling. You could use art in a lot of different ways, and actually different medias also, clay, painting, rock painting, just kind of get them doing art, and they do start to open up more than you would expect. I was also thinking, with high schoolers and feeling emotions or trying to control some of those emotions, meditation is also good. Listening to there's lots of different meditations you can find even on like YouTube, and it's really helping get grounded and feel those emotions, if they're having a hard time coming up with the words themselves.
Great, thank you, Casey. Elizabeth or Shelli, what would you add to that?
I think Casey hit it on the head even for middle school. The meditation piece, I think definitely starting it with your child, doing it with your child. You can Google meditation for teens. There's 5-10 minute meditations out there, but doing them when they are regulated, when you are in a good place, and practicing that ahead of time. So when they do get in a dysregulated state, you guys can work through it together, and you can work on these things together, and they've kind of bought into it, because we have to get preteens, teenagers to buy into things ahead of time. So they've kind of bought into it, and they can understand what their breath feels like, and just how breathing does affect their body when they are regulated. So when they are dysregulated, they can start really feeling that change to be able to kind of name what they're feeling.
I would add to that, to say that pre-teaching or that pre-experience when they're not dysregulated is really important. One of the things that we do at Fischer is we actually use zones of regulation. We talk about that with our students, so that when they are feeling those emotions and maybe they can't really communicate exactly what they're feeling, they can identify what color or what zone they're on. And so we'll say, you don't look like you're on green right now. How are you feeling? And they'll say, I'm on red, or I'm on blue, or whatever it is. And then through that identification process, then we can kind of talk about, okay, well, what's making you feel on red? And that usually is like a good way to help them identify what they're feeling, so that we can help support them through that dysregulation and get them back to green.
All right, Tracy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the zones is a great tool, Shelli. I know a lot of the elementary schools in the district are teaching that. I know we here at Longwood are doing that. And that is something that parents, you could ask your child's teacher for, or a counselor at the school, or a social worker, and that is something they can probably provide you. But the other thing too, I think it's really important to think about going back to that regulated state. Are they able to even talk about the emotion, because they're able to access what they're thinking and feeling? And for younger kids who don't have emotions, a lot of times I will describe with them, I don't know exactly what you're feeling either, but it doesn't look comfortable, or it feels like it's really hard. We start using sensation words, like it feels prickly, or it feels like something's poking, and they can relate to those types of concepts. And we can then get a better understanding of maybe what they're feeling, and with the ultimate goal of what's really behind the behavior, and what is it we either need to teach, or what need do we need to meet.
Great, thank you so much. Jeannie, do you want to go to our second question? All right, something else that was asked more than once is how do you handle the quick changing of a wide range of emotions, the high to the low and back up again, sometimes in a very short period of time?
What I was thinking of, first of all, was like just staying calm. I don't react. Again, Tracy really hit on this earlier, don't flip your lid. Just kind of stay calm, stay in the moment, and don't engage with the aggressive, with that aggressive emotion, that anger emotion. Don't engage. You just let your child know, I see you're feeling, a little upset right now. I'm going to give you some time to calm down, and then we can get back to this conversation. Give yourself a timeout. You don't necessarily have to send them to their room. If you need to walk away, and just let them know, hey, we can continue when we're in a better state of mind and we're both calmer. But definitely don't engage with that aggressive. And or the disrespectful emotions, just definitely don't engage with that.
I would jump in to say that, there's that quote out there that the children who need the most love are going to show it in the most unloving ways. And I think keeping that in your mindset, I'm a mom of 4. And so I know, those emotions and the swings, and then you've got multiple kids in there. And so just keeping that in, that whatever they're showing you outwardly isn't necessarily what they're needing internally. And so I loved, the idea of like just staying really centered yourself, and making sure that you're ready to handle their emotions is important. So a lot of times we use the phrase like match their energy. We want them to match our energy. So if our energy is heightened, they're going to continue to be heightened. So it's just a little tool to maybe use.
And I think modeling yourself and understanding, yes, as parents, I have 3 kids myself, and we yell. The Monday morning example is I feel like my house all the time in the morning. And you really do feel that. And it's modeling and taking a step back, taking a deep breath, or repairing if you do yell, or, you do display behavior that you're not proud of. You need to calm yourself down, be able to regulate your own emotions, and then repair that. Apologize, state why you were upset, and let them know that even as a grown adult, you lose your temper too, but you're able to then be able to go back and understand what you did wrong and how you could fix it. And just really modeling that behavior, especially, in elementary school, preteens, will really help them as they're going through middle school, high school, and beyond.
Yeah, I totally jump on that. I mean, hopefully, you've learned a couple of new technique strategies tonight that will help you. But like Casey and Shelli and Elizabeth have already said, I think it's really imperative for us to stay calm and for us to stay connected. And hopefully we do some of that pre-work, building and strengthening that connection with our kids and that relationship, so that they know we are going to be supporting and we can be predictable and they can count on us to be there. And lastly, like Casey said, just try not to engage in some of that stuff. Like I said earlier, try not to take it personally. Our kids are feeling an emotion and they are not in that thinking brain. So if we can stay in that lens, it helps us to stay more focused on calming them and then moving back to that relating and to that reasoning.
Thank you. All right, so here's one that's got a lot of people asking about. So my child has a difficulty accepting no as an answer. And I think we see this, like I said, from the youngest kids to some of our oldest kids. How do you explain to your children that it's okay to be angry or frustrated or disappointed, but it's not okay to be disrespectful to parents or teachers? So how do you teach them that line that it's okay to feel your feelings, but not to be disrespectful?
Well, and I feel like it's kind of the answer is in that question.
Right.
It is, I'm sorry, sometimes the answer is no, but you can't be disrespectful. It's that's just not okay to be. You don't like it when people are disrespectful to you, but sometimes the answer is no. Life isn't fair. Sometimes things, you can't always get your way. Just I guess that's really the biggest thing, is that like I said, the answers in that question is that you can't be disrespectful. You don't like it when you're disrespected, so you can't do that to others. That there are people in positions of authority, such as parents, teachers, and you're not always going to like everything that they say or ask you to do. And just, let them know it doesn't mean that, a parent doesn't love you, or please don't think that a teacher doesn't like you if they're asking you to do something and you don't want to do it. Or if you think it's unfair, it's not because they don't like you. That is not the case. So yeah, I guess that's kind of it.
I think finding that replacement for that disrespectful, those words typically is what it is, right? That we're dealing with. So finding something, a replacement behavior for that. At the middle school level, everyone's wearing a hoodie, or they have big sweatpant pockets, or, flannel pants pockets. So sometimes it's put your hands in your pockets, clench your fists, but close your mouth. And we practice it, and we practice it often, because nope, your mouth needs to stay closed. You need to control. And again, it's them learning control, and it goes all back to brain science and all of that. So, but it's learning to control parts of your body. And you can be angry, and it's okay to be angry, and your anger could very well be completely valid. However, you need to find a way to deal with it. Then you take some deep breaths. You need to take a break out of the room. You need to get a drink of water, go to your bedroom. As parents, you need to go to your bedroom. You need time away from a cell phone or device, to where you can not sit with that emotion. You need to be able to sit with that emotion. But just kind of finding some sort of a replacement behavior.
So I would agree, that answer being somewhat in that question. I think validating their feelings is important, and I think always validating what they're feeling, but setting boundaries and clear boundaries about what is acceptable when they are feeling a certain way is important. And then one of the things that I actually was using at home and then transferred it into the classroom and into the school is just a phrase that we say, it's comply before complain. And what that means is, if a teacher or a parent or anyone is asking you to do something, to comply with what the request is, assume positive intent in the request. And then if you have something you want to talk about, if you're frustrated, your voice is important. You just have to do it in a respectful way. So that comes after the compliance. Then you can address it at a later time. Maybe it's at the end of class. Maybe it's at the end of dinner. Maybe it's, when you've got some alone time with your child at home, whatever the situation is. And so we just try to teach that their voice is important, and validate their feelings, but just teach them how to use that in a really respectful way.
Yeah, great advice. Ditto. The thing I would piggyback on is the validation of the feelings. It is so huge. We all do, like I said earlier, but validating the feeling and genuinely getting, like, I know you're not happy about this, and I would feel the same way, or I have felt the same way, is really important. Sometimes adults or parents will say to me, well, I'm not apologizing to my kid. It is the way it is. But when we, feel that way, we miss the opportunity again of really connecting with our kid. And what we're really apologizing for is not that I made a decision, you cannot go here or you cannot have this. I'm apologizing that I know this is going to upset you. However, I'm your parent. There's a reason I've made this, and they don't care about the reasons. It's just about you made it, and that is what it is. And we can acknowledge the feeling and the frustration. The other thing I think I would be really mindful of in here is that modeling piece. Do we model respectful behavior to adults? Do we model respectful behavior to parents and teachers and peers and friends? Do we model respectful behavior towards our kids? You know, sometimes we think just because they're kids, maybe they don't deserve that. They have to earn it first. But I think when we are able to give it, that's when we get it. And I think that that is just something to be really mindful of. I said earlier, sometimes I know as adults, we ask our kids to do things that we ourselves are not doing. And if we're not, then we need to really kind of take a look at that and take an honest inventory.
I think that respect and that you gain with your own child builds that connection and that deeper
Mhm.
connection. So no becomes much more accepted
Yeah.
as a loving no versus
Absolutely.
something out of anger.
Good point.
Mhm. Yes, thank you. All right. So switching gears a little bit away from some of those more angry, frustrated, disappointed feelings, how do you teach your child to be assertive enough to face peer conflict or so-called bullies in school, especially when you have a very sensitive child? And what can you do to boost their self-confidence?
When it comes to bullying situations, the way, when I'm talking with students, I just remind them not to give that other person the power, you know, walk away. Just walk away with your head held high, not just do not give them that power. You might feel sad inside, you might feel frustrated inside, but don't let them see it. Don't let the other person see it. I mean, and definitely, let your parent know, let, staff member know that this is going on. But in that moment, if someone is bullying you, don't give them that power, don't react, walk away with your head held high. And then, yes, if it continues, please let, teacher, parent know, and, and let those people deal with it if it continues. If it's in school, staff can deal with it. And if it's out of school, I would totally encourage parents, if it's something that continues, to reach out to that other parent, and see if there's a way that, things can be resolved that way. But in regards to the question, that's how I would, coach and teach my student in front of me and and my own children, how to handle a bullying type situation.
I had to laugh when you said don't give them the power. I feel like you must have been in our classroom today. We had that exact conversation about the fact that we end up giving them the power when we react or when we validate what they're saying about us, and how we don't want to be able to give them that, and we want to continue to fill our buckets by filling other people's buckets. And we use the phrase a lot of times with our students that hurt people. And I think that that's something that they start to realize, that if the person is doing something that is hurting them, they're probably feeling pretty bad about something in their lives. And it gives them just a different lens to view that bullying situation. So.
Yeah.
I like that. That perspective is really important, especially, for elementary kids as well, but when you're really looking at perspective with those preteens and teenagers as well. I think just setting growth mindset at home, always working on the power of yet. And if you've never heard of the power of yet, I know the elementary schools talk about the power of yet. You can Google it. Role playing at home, making them more comfortable in a situation, giving them those experiences in such a safe environment, get the whole family involved, and really just giving them, you may not feel comfortable yet, and let's talk about this. I think another piece is really just making sure your child has that safe place at home and at school, talking to them about who at school do they feel comfortable with, where do they feel comfortable talking to somebody at school, and then what is your safe place at home? What's that routine look like for you? Maybe it's the dinner table, maybe it's before bed, maybe it's in the car on the way to an after school activity or an extracurricular activity, but where is their safe place where they know they're going to have your full attention? Again, like Tracy had said, you're unplugged and you are there to listen and to not judge and to not even give advice, just to listen and take it all in and help them work through that. And then through that way, you can really work with the power of yet.
Awesome. Yeah. Those are, that's great feedback. And I don't know much more I have to add. We do talk a lot about keeping your power, even at the elementary school, we talk about that. And I know, this is going to vary from a kindergartner to a fifth grader, right? We have a vast range there of what they're able to take in and how they're able to process. What I see more is that peer conflict. And how do we handle it? One of the things that I talked with a fifth grader just today about is that, I get to choose whether or not I'm going to be offended by something somebody does or says or a comment they make about me. And I know that sometimes that's hard for people. I know sometimes it's hard for parents, they're like, why are you telling my child that? My child, it's not being treated nicely. And never have I said that that's okay. And I said this to this fifth grader today. I said, it's not okay that someone called you this name. Absolutely not. And the discipline took place. But in terms of how do I help my child, I said to the student, are you going to believe what they said to be true? Is there truth in what they said? Do you feel that way? Do you think that's true about you? Are you going to be offended? Are you not? And how do I keep my own power? And that coming from you at home through that supportive, connective relationship can really go a long way.
Thank you. All right, finally, how do you know when your child needs to seek an outside therapist or mental health services? And how do you start that process? So when do you say, I feel like my child needs more than maybe I can offer them as a parent? And where would you start with that?
Knowing, like, if your child is like starting to, shut down, if you find that they're having a harder time coping with problems or navigating problems, if they're not willing to talk with, parents and open up and work with you and work with the parents, or if you're seeing like the extreme moods, the extreme highs and the extreme lows, let's see, from like that isolation to, explosive anger. If you're seeing, excessive anxiety, the excessive feelings of being overwhelmed, if they're feeling lower, for longer periods of time, and if you're seeing those changes, I would definitely recommend seeking an outside therapist. At the high school level, I'm always, letting parents know that I have access, and all of us here have access to a database called Referral GPS. And all I need is your insurance provider, and I can look up all therapists in the area who specialize in different things, such as anxiety or depression or LGBTQ plus, anything. I can narrow it down by specialty, whatever the problem is. And so I always let parents know that. So that's a place to start. You can start with your school social worker or your guidance counselor. We can definitely help out with that. So that's a great place to start.
Reaching out to anybody at school, any trusted adult that you're comfortable with as a parent, and saying, this is what you're seeing, what are you seeing at school? And then they can also help you then put you in touch with the right people. But if you're seeing multiple areas in your child's life being affected, if you're seeing your family relationships changing, their academics are changing also, friendships, hobbies, they're isolating themselves, like Casey said, sleep habits, appetite changes, all these things are kind of happening, and you're noticing all of it. It's reach out to all the people in your child's life and see know what everybody's seeing, and then there's plenty of people at schools especially that can help you.
I would just add to, I think those were fantastic answers to that question, but you can also seek support from your child's pediatrician. So if you have a trusted medical professional that your child sees, you can have those conversations with them as well. And they can always provide supports or guidance on where to go next.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is, how do you know when your child needs this? I think one is trusting your instincts as a parent, your child. I think another is really hearing what perhaps their teachers have to say, particularly at the elementary level, when they're spending an entire day with them. And they are, seeing changes or concerning behaviors or noticing mental health concerns. Trust that your child's teacher has your child's best interest at heart and really wants to see them do well, and consider maybe, this is the time. And the last thing I would say is it's never going to hurt. There's never going to be a reason that, well, I shouldn't say never, but you might as well go ahead and check it out and engage, find someone. If your child benefits, great. If they're not, then maybe they didn't need it, but don't be afraid to take that first step and to reach out to your, helpers at school or your doctor. Like I said, there is no judgment, there is no shame. Many of us and our children and our students need help at times. And so it's okay. So reach out. Don't be afraid to do that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tracy and Shelli and Elizabeth and Casey. You offered so much knowledge and so much expertise for these different questions that parents have presented. As we go ahead and wrap up, I'm going to pass it back over to Dr. Talley, who is going to finish up our evening for us.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, everybody who presented on the panel. It was wonderful. I was taking notes, and one of the things that I wrote multiple times, modeling. I think it's important that we have to model for our children. And I appreciated the question or the comment about apologizing. I think it's important for us to understand our children are looking at us. And if we never apologize as an adult, will they ever learn to apologize as children? And so I think it's important for them to hear us apologize and to say we're sorry, so that they can understand this is what we do as good citizens. And so I think that was important. And then lastly, the consistency is being important. I think all of us know that when you have young children, they actually get a little bit cranky when they don't have their bed at the same bedtime. They enjoy the consistency and the predictability. And so when we have that in place, it makes things to be easier for all of us. So those are my notes I took. I hope all of our parents saw this and heard this and found it to be informative. I remind everybody we will have on March 4th, our mental health symposium at Mattilla Valley High School. It will be from 8 a.m. to 12:30. It will be another great opportunity for you to hear from practitioners, to ask some questions, to gain some knowledge about how to support your own mental health and the mental health of your children. I hope to see you there. I look forward to it. To everybody, thank you again for participating and for doing this. And to our parents who are on tonight, thank you for coming. This will be on our website for you to watch whenever you need to. Everybody, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.